Hello and welcome to a football podcast. My name is Devang Desai and I'm joined as always by Mr. David Goss. David, how are you, sir?
I am fantastic. I'm excited, Devang, to step into your world because you were the one who worked at EA. You are the FIFA expert. So to hear from one of your guys and to learn a little bit is exciting.
Indeed, we step beyond the computer screen into the net or into the 1995 movie Hackers to explain what is coming next. I was an EA Sports FIFA guy. I did work on a video game franchise, but I think I learned a lot coming out of that place, and I knew coming in. It was an eye-opening experience, and Chu Morah, known as Chu Boy now, a YouTube celebrity, a YouTube influencer in the FIFA landscape, a host of multiple events. He's really carved out his own niche, and it's crazy, David. I feel like a couple of years ago, or maybe 5 years ago even, the idea that FIFA as an esport would be a thing, I think was a pie in the sky notion to a lot of people, but we were kind of forced into it in 2020 and to watch people play FIFA on TV. And it was kind of seeing that bet that was made a few years ago come to fruition. And it was really interesting talking to Chu about that.
Yeah, it's interesting, Devang. And you talk about it in the interview, which we're about to get to, but like a lot of the angles that you and Chu Boy talk about and are thinking about, I just never really thought about because it wasn't my world to make decisions on of like, will people want to watch this full time instead of soccer or, as a supplement to soccer, and who will people root for and how will people care about it? But it's definitely grown heavily. It's definitely a big reason I remember people that I knew getting into soccer and learning about the game. And I think that's still the case. So it has a huge place in the soccer world, whether it's instead of or just as part of the whole organism. But it's really interesting to see how it's grown. And I don't think we're even close to there yet. I don't know where there will be, but that's one of the things that's fascinating about this is how new it is and how much potential it has.
Definitely. I think the idea that you have this legion of entrepreneurs who skew younger, who know, frankly, a lot more about the current landscape that a lot of people are trying to operate in. And you can kind of see the people who are flailing a bit and the people who are thriving. And it's those early adapters like Chu who are leading the way. So just before we get to that, we are on Patreon for $4 a month. You'll help us create more exclusive content, more unique interviews one-on-one with some of the biggest newsmakers in the sport that will drop monthly. Plus, if you sign up before August 4th, you'll get a very cool 1994 Upper Deck World Cup card as a special gift. Please share what you got or what you packed when you open it up on Twitter at A Football Podcast. All right, without further ado, it's my interview with Chu Boy. Welcome back to A Football Podcast. My guest today is a content creator, host, a jack of all trades. His name is Chu Morah, but you might know him as Chu Boy. Chu, what's happening?
I'm doing all right. Just I would say I'm just staying inside, but I did just go outside, so that would be a lot.
Safely though, right? Safely.
Yes, I avoided all people.
Good.
So I was very safe about that. I treated them like they were zombies.
That's a new thing now. I don't make eye contact with people out there. It's just you go out, you get what you need to get, and you make it back to base camp and wait for the next chance. You've been in Toronto now a while, but you came from Vancouver. Can I consider you a Torontoite now though? Are you more Toronto than Vancouver?
Honestly, I've since last year, I've already claimed myself to be more Toronto than Vancouver. As soon as I got here, I've been for 2 years. As soon as I got here in 2018, I went through that first summer, and summers in Toronto, for anyone that knows, are pretty, they get pretty rowdy in a good way. And they're a lot of fun. And as soon as that hit, and I finally got to be in a city that has basketball, which I've been watching a lot, as much as soccer. I guess, well, not as much as soccer, excuse me, because I was weirdly obsessed with that sport growing up, of course. But that was always my second sport. I played basketball when I was in high school, but I never had seen basketball games. I'd never been in a city that had basketball NBA games to go to. So this being the first time, I just went all out. Spent way too much money on playoff tickets last year. We won't talk about that, but
and everything. You saw the Kawhi shot live. I mean, that was good.
That is true. I saw the Kawhi shot live. I almost didn't go to that match because that game because my friends didn't want to go because they thought that like $100 was too much for a game 7. Yeah, dude. I just ignored them from now on when they talk about like playoffs. They thought $100 Canadian was too much for a game 7, and I just was like, all right, you know what? I'm just gonna go alone, and it was like the best sports moment I've ever seen in my life.
So I brought up Vancouver's, and it's because that's where you and I first met in an interesting circumstance where I was working at Electronic Arts, the maker of the FIFA video game franchise, and you were visiting as our guest, but you had basically done my job at EA prior to that. So I kind of wanted to start today by asking you how you started with the EA Sports FIFA franchise.
Yeah, so I remember this was like one thing I always wanted to do. You know, in college I was an industrial engineer, but engineering is kind of boring. I figured out once I started to do like internships and stuff, and I was nearing graduation, and so I was like, my two favorite things were soccer and video games. You know, any kind of video game, not just FIFA, but like, you know, Call of Duty, FIFA, you name it. Like I used to play a lot of Rock Band actually. But I always wanted to work in that industry. So, you know, I was in the US at the time. I'm not a US citizen, I'm Nigerian and Canadian. So you have like this 1-year visa that you get after you graduate from college. And, you know, after that visa is done, then you have to like get sponsored for like another visa, like an H1 visa or something like that to stay in the US permanently. Fortunately, my company didn't want to sponsor me. So I had to, you know, either go to Canada or go back to Nigeria or something. So I was like, all right, you know what, let me try Canada out and let me just go for video game jobs, like nothing but video game jobs. And the first job I happened to see online was one for being the community manager for FIFA, the FIFA franchise. So I literally that same night that I was told I was not going to get sponsored for the job, I stayed up, made a resume, sent it off. You know, for anyone who wants to get a foot in the door, definitely stalk people on LinkedIn and try to find their email and email them your resume directly. It actually does work. That's how I got my foot in the door. And then about a week and a half later, I got the job and moved up from Seattle to Vancouver. And then I was the FIFA community manager.
So at that time, what year is this? This is
2012. This is like March 2012.
So where's Ultimate Team at this point? The FIFA Ultimate Team section. Like, is this still just starting kind of thing, or is it already going at this point?
Well, it was, I guess you could say it was still in its infancy. I mean, it was about 3 years old. I joined halfway through FIFA 12. And I guess anybody, you know, quick summary for anyone who doesn't know, the Ultimate Team side of FIFA Ultimate Team is like, I guess, the Pokemon of FIFA, where like every football player in the world has his own like trading card, and then you buy packs to improve your team, and then you play against other people in like actual FIFA. So I was hired because the marketing team didn't really understand Ultimate Team as a whole, like in terms of like how to make it like mass market, how to like understand what the community is all about, what they talk about, and also how to work better with the development team. So at this time, it was about 3 years into FIFA Ultimate Team, and it was starting in FIFA 09. So in 12, it was about 3 years old, but it was still like that mode that like the company was just like, all right, it sort of makes a lot of money, but like, what is it all about? So my job was to be like, all right, this is what it's about.
It's funny because I think one of the first few things people used to ask me when I was working at EA was like, oh, are you picking team of the week? Or like, why did you pick that? Or like things that on the outside, it seemed like you would have control, but you don't, because there's so many people involved in the process, and the process is time staking, and there's a lot of thought put into it. And that's definitely something I don't think I considered when I was outside those doors, but when I went inside there, I'm like, okay, like this isn't just watching some Bundesliga games on Saturday and picking at a guy because of such and such. But I ask about Ultimate Team because I think it took on in the history or the timeline of the FIFA franchise. It became such an important aspect, not only to the company itself because of what a moneymaker it was and how many people were involved, but because it began to shape the culture and the discourse, and we were getting people who were able to begin creating their own content based off of the ultimate team that they have, or the ultimate team that they're creating, whether it be from scratch and not buying packs, doing it with no money spent, the road to glory, or people opening packs like crazy. But do you remember the moment when that kind of shift happened and you saw that merge maybe from it's an EA possession and EA is going to push all this out to now these guys are making all this content. Let's go with them. Let's work together with them. Was that a kind of right away thing or something that EA had to kind of talk themselves into?
In terms of the content side of things, I think it was something that was initially started like right before I joined. I remember the first ever, we have these capture events where, we invite YouTubers over to record the game early and play the game, make videos for it. And, this happened like 3 weeks before I actually joined. So, I had a little known guy called KSI hanging around. I think he was like 16 or something like that. He's obviously gotten to do bigger and better things. But so that was like the first ever, I think, capture or, content creator event that they ever had. And then from then on, I helped establish those events and like establish the relationship with the content creators, influencers, things like that. That was an ongoing process. And I would say, this was like the infancy of serious YouTube content creation in general in terms of video games, like when all the big guys were just starting. So this is, again, 2012 and then later. And then I would say like when it really like hit like, all right, this is, a big part of things. I would say it's like FIFA 14. I think FIFA 14 was just like the time that like everything just took off. Like FIFA 13 was probably my favorite FIFA Ultimate Team, but I think FIFA 14 was a mixture of both. It was when, obviously content, just blew up, like the likes of like Rotoshaw, Mad HD Gamer, KSI, all those kind of guys. Bateson as well. But it was also the time that like EA finally like saw FIFA Ultimate Team as like the main thing in the company. I remember before then it was kind of like, those of us who were working on FIFA Ultimate Team, we were just kind of those guys somewhere in the office that like apparently did some like magic and like all of a sudden printed money and it was like, cool, all right. And then I think it was, like around FIFA, I think a year before that, like FIFA 12, I think we got a new CEO. That's when Andrew Wilson came in and he was like, all right, he is all about digital. And so that's when things started to focus on, Ultimate Team, stuff like that. And then that led to the launch of FIFA 14. I think FIFA 14 was the first time the majority of people who played FIFA actually played Ultimate Team. And then everything was like super serious. Like now we had people watching over what we did and like when we do promos and things like that.
Yeah.
People asking me when's the team of the season? I was like, you never care.
There's a lot of random messages you get from random people, and it's it's time sensitive messages as well.
Oh yeah.
I think it's the realization that the stuff that you could hire an agency for or an outside firm for is being created by people who are actively playing your game for free and have an audience of the exact kind of people that you want to get on board. And it connects those two areas so well that it made so much sense. And then you saw this explosion that you mentioned, Chu, of these guys not only having careers off of it, but being able to do things and visit football grounds and travel places that a lot of people wanted to do. But I think for me, when I started the role, I think the interesting part for me, among many things, to sell you highly, Chu, is that when you left EA, you decided to venture out on your own and become a content creator yourself. So I want to ask you about that process and maybe that thought process in your mind of like when you knew this is what you wanted to do.
Yeah, well, I guess they say, if you can't beat them, join them. But, since I was like, I had so many roles in the company and then all of a sudden I became the influencer manager as well. And I was just kind of like, I was looking at what the future would look like. I was looking at these guys and I'm like, they have way more control over their lives than I do. I have, a boss tell me when I need to show up at work. I have somebody tell me how much salary I can make. And I was looking at these guys. I was like, they're starting out, but like, with the way things are going, like I'd rather be on that side in terms of control than like on my side, Like
this isn't going to stop. Like it's going to keep going is the thinking, right? Like that's what the page I'm on as well.
Exactly. So like this was like 2015. Again, like 2014, everything like in like FIFA sense had just blown up, and then I was like, Well, I mean, like you just said, it's like, they're average, they're reaching people who like are literally the target audience. I'm like, that makes so much sense than like spending $5 million on like a Super Bowl ad when you could just give like a kid like KSI, a, 30,000 or 40,000, and you're probably gonna reach the same people. So like, won't that just keep growing to the point where like the KSIs of the world are gonna be paid the same amount of the Super Bowl commercial in like 10 years? Is what I was thinking to myself. I was like, all right, you know what? One thing I don't like is I'm very stubborn, so I don't like having people tell me what to do and like people tell me when to show up. So I'm like that, and looking at the future, I'd rather be on that side. So in 2015, I think October, right after the launch of FIFA 16, I wanted to make sure the FIFA 16 came out. So I didn't ditch the team or anything. I decided to become a content creator.
So this is where I and a crew of others enter the picture in the timeline, because shortly after Chu leaves, the esports division at FIFA begins, and then I go to Vancouver to work on that side of it, and this is where I kind of wanted to focus our conversation today, Chu, because I think we mentioned the content creators and the YouTubers who are well established and who have a massive following. I mean, you mentioned KSI. KSI has fully gone out of the original zone he was in and now become a figure across multiple genres. And I think if you talk to anyone back in that time, I don't think anyone expected that, but that is where we are now. But I think the question when I started at EA, and I think it remains the question now, is esports is obviously big. Esports is massive. There's millions of people watching countless leagues and games, but FIFA, can that be done for this game where the equivalent is actually watching people play it in real life, whereas this is the video game version? And even though it's one of the most massively successful games in the world, will that translate to viewership for people watching the best people play FIFA around the world? So that was the task that we started with, and then from there, I think it's taken many turns, but I think we'll cover them when we talk with Chu right after the break. Welcome back to a football podcast. FIFA esports, Chu, your first thought when this idea was becoming less of an idea and more of a reality, when the plans were coming into fruition and it was like, we're going to do this. Did you think highly of the idea? What was your initial prognosis?
Well, I definitely like the idea because it's something that, like I said, I left the FIFA 16, and before then it wasn't like something that was taken seriously, I would say, at EA. So I just like that it was like something that I've never seen before, because being at EA for 4 years, I kind of had seen it all in terms of FIFA. So I'm like, oh, this is something new that I haven't seen, I haven't experienced. And, I do probably want to see competitive FIFA, so it'll teach me how to get better. And I'll see it as entertainment, I think I was worried that, like, as someone who's worked at EA, I would say my thing about the company sometimes is that they kind of, they just want to go into an idea without fully fleshing it out and thinking about it, because they just want to be in the space that's going to be the future. So they're just going to jump in, see what sticks, and then figure it out later. So that's something I've known the company to do. So I kind of expected that. And I think they're starting to figure out now. It's like literally the genesis of EA Sports, and it only started in FIFA 17, so 4 years ago. So now they're kind of sort of figuring out. It's still a lot of growing pains, but it can obviously only get better. But I'm happy that it's here. But like you said, I think the struggle that we have in FIFA esports over the Counter Strikes, the PUBGs, the Fortnites, things like that, is that we're based off of something that's more popular than the thing we're playing. So we're always going to be, I think, for a long time, we're just going to be, the supplement to the thing we're based off of.
Well, I think now you see during the pandemic, sports channels need to fill content, and one of the few things that are still going on are esports, and some of them involve sports games, including Madden and FIFA. I know the Madden champion, the guy didn't throw the ball the entire time in the championship tournament, which is like It's hilarious to me. Not hilarious because I feel I know people on that Madden team, but it's like on one way, it's like, wow, the guy found a way to beat the system and it's super newsworthy and people are talking about it. But in another way, it's like, oh God, this game is broken and this guy hasn't exposed it on national TV. So I was of two minds when I was watching that. But I think I had the same thoughts of you can watch this already. And even though FIFA is extremely popular, you ask anybody on the street and I feel like 90% would be like, yeah, I'm pretty good at FIFA. Like I could beat you. Like that's the way it was said of like, oh, I've got game. But when you saw these pros play, I was impressed. I was taken aback. I'm like, this is insane. The ability is extremely high, but let's see if it translates to actual viewership. And I think the question, Chu, I would ask you is like within your audience, during this pandemic is viewership up, and B, do you feel like you are you acting as a substitute possibly for real football at this time, and maybe is this the time for FIFA esports?
I would say the first question, yes, viewership is up usually around this time with FIFA since it's a yearly game. FIFA is one of the few games that comes out every year that like keeps people's interest for about 10 to 12 months. Usually with the game that comes out every year, after the first 3 months, viewership goes down. And viewership for FIFA starts to go down around this time. But with all this pandemic stuff, things have actually been really good. Like we probably had record-breaking months, which usually doesn't happen. It usually happens between September to December when the new FIFA comes out. So it's been great. And in terms of substituting for real FIFA, I mean, I would guess so because you're just kind of, I would say we're kind of substituting for not necessarily the I guess the actual playing of football, but just kind of like the discussion around it, I'm replacing what like Gary Neville would have been doing,
Right.
He has to wait for real football. Now he's just regurgitating like stuff about like, all these, news sites and stuff are just talking about like, oh, what is the greatest team to play in the Premier League, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, we've seen it before. Now we can see something happen in FIFA and like you can interact with those actual players right now.
And you have guys playing with content creators all the time, which is something that I think when this started, when the esports division started, it was like let's try and involve real footballers as well and get them to show how good these players are who are playing the video game, because I think that's also something that's extremely hard to sell. Like the average viewer, if they see someone playing FIFA on TV, it's like, how do you show them that this person is extremely good and way better than you are? Because I think that for me was something that you can't immediately ascertain that, right, when you're watching on the screen. But like, Chu, do you remember the first event we had? Do you remember your initial thoughts going into that? Because like it was an incredibly big production for the first go around, and I think it's interesting to see where it came from that beginning back in 2017 to where it is now. Or I think the scale, like you mentioned, is something that they've been working on to find the right fit.
I think the scale has definitely been bigger. I think at first, in 2017, I guess, anytime you do something for the first time, you don't really know what to focus on. I think, I think at the start they were trying to like, and this is something I still disagree with, where they've gone away from this a bit. But I think at the start they were trying to sell FIFA to your mom and dad and your brother that doesn't play video games and like anybody who is not a hardcore FIFA player. They're trying to like, make your family members
right.
watch FIFA.
Like some random guy walking down the street's gonna be like, oh, I saw this on a VAR screen and I'm gonna watch this now.
Exactly, right? Versus I think the best way to go is just to cater to the people who like absolutely go nuts for FIFA and want to watch every time, go super technical, super in-depth about everything. But I think the first year was just kind of like, hey, this is a show and there's a video game that we play and like anybody can watch. And let's make it super basic so everybody understands what's going on versus like, you talk to the hardcore guy, you make him happy with the show. He convinces his friends to watch too. And you're more likely to get somebody to watch something when their friend tells them instead. So I think they've gone away from that a bit. They still, I think, focus on that still quite a bit, but I think they've gone away from that. And I think one thing that's nice that they're doing now is that like I really have to give them credit for that is they're making like the players themselves feel like stars. I think the production value around some of the things that they've done and the way that they position the guys are like, yeah, you want to be this guy. You at home on the couch,
right.
You want to be Emerson
right.
Star, like because this guy is living the life right now.
Or you want to be Tex, who's a teenager and who's won everything there is to win, right? Like that, and I think that star making idea, quote unquote, was something that was talked about at the beginning, and they hit their stride later on in that. But it's funny because I think if they talked about it more technically from the go, you probably would have lost some people right away, but you would have won the respect of the people who maybe would eat this stuff up. But I don't know if that's enough numbers, right? Like, I don't know if that balance could have been hit perfectly, but
it's tough to understand but then you go to like freaking like Counter-Strike, because like they don't care about the other people who don't watch.
Yeah, and you tune in, like, you tune in randomly and have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, like and one thing that always upsets me about, like, I was watching I forgot what it's called exactly, but I was watching the Rainbow Six like final in like Montreal, and people are losing their absolute shit. I'm like, you guys are like, it's an arena that's packed. It's got like 2,000 to 3,000 people, and people are going like absolutely insane, like they're a football arena, and like yelling and like screaming. It's for Rainbow Six, and I'm like, in FIFA we don't get this, because for people it's like, wait, this, like, why would I go nuts for this when I'm like, I can watch like the actual thing and go nuts for that? Like, I can actually go watch Man United. So like that feels weird. I feel like it feels weird to people who watch FIFA, because I feel like one thing that we need to work on in FIFA is like when there's a few leagues that do it really well, and I have to give a shout out to them. It's like the Dutch league, the Eredivisie, and the Danish league, the Superliga. Is that like when we do like events, maybe it's the location that we do them, like in London, like people are really like very quiet, which really bothers me. But then I think that's because it's not team based, because in the Eredivisie, the Dutch league, you know, it's two players from the FIFA Pro players from Ajax versus two players from Feyenoord. So it's like a derby. So like people are going nuts, but they're going nuts because it's Ajax versus Feyenoord, and because it's FIFA. But the added element of supporting your club that you already support in real life, and like going at people, it gives you that feeling that you are in a football arena. And I think one thing that FIFA needs to get around is that it needs to be more team-based than individuals, because I feel like you can only go so far with football if it's like, football is a team sport. We watch it because of teams, not because, I mean, except for maybe like the likes of Ronaldo, Neymar, Mbappe, you want to watch Ronaldo. So like me, I'm a fanboy. I go wherever he's going. But, you know, when it comes to FIFA, it's like, all right, you know, we have the text, we have the MS Desai, but I think that can only go so far. But then if it's like text, the Liverpool player text, oh my God, yeah, let's go support the Liverpool player text. Let's go support the Toronto FC player Phil B, you know?
So the idea is like, and like you're basically saying like pro clubs, but souped up so that it's individual guys on a single team possibly, and then
like I wouldn't say, because for me, I mean, a lot of people are on the 11 versus 11 train. I'm like, yeah, but honestly, like for me, it'll be hard to track like 22 people running around on a video game screen.
Right.
I'd rather have it so it's like 3 or 4v4. In my opinion,
I was actually true. I was going to disagree, because I think when I connected, it definitely wasn't like who is playing with who, because what you would see is these are ultimate team based players, and a lot of the pros are using the exact same players, same cards. But for me, it was watching like a Dosari or a Tex be so dominant that you'd be like, okay, like I'll respect this individual guy has won me over. So like I will support him. So in that idea, it was kind of like tennis or golf maybe, where it's like you're cheering for one guy, and if he's out, I'm not going to watch anymore. So I could kind of see that, but I think it's there's a lot of ways you can go, and I think that's why it was so difficult, and it remains a tough thing to do. But they've definitely made strides, that team there, in terms of finding a new angle of presenting FIFA as an esport. But I wanted to ask you, Chu, about your experience with MLS and then the CPL in that regard as well, because like I guess off the top, like you went to you're a Whitecaps guy, you went to a bunch of games, but like your initial knowledge of the league, was it super strong? Were you super big MLS guy, or was it kind of like I'll pay attention every now and then?
I mean, it was definitely. I think when I first moved to Vancouver in 2012, that's when I really got into MLS, because I could actually go to the games. Because I think I really got sold when I got to see Beckham for the first time when he visited from LA Galaxy to Whitecaps. And I was like, Beckham was like my biggest idol, like 100%. And the fact I got to see him, I was like, all right, like this is a league where I can see, Beckham, and then
This is a good league. He's here.
Yeah,
see that
exactly.
the exact marketing
Right?
worked. The exact marketing. They got it.
No,
they got it.
like literally, I don't think I would have initially even thought about MLS if Beckham didn't go when he first went, right? So it definitely 100% worked. And then just to be able to go to the games, and like, to be fair, back then, I mean, not so much now. Whitecaps were pretty exciting to watch back in the days of Kakuta Mane, and later on to Alphonso Davies, who's doing really great. Now, not so much, but I think MLS is trying to move away from the just to bringing the one guy that's like kind of old from Europe, and doing things around him, to like building up their old stars. So it's changed a bit, but I respect it.
It was a weird spot because I think you'd have people who were super into the clubs and the teams and the day oneers, and you'd have people who'd come if Pirlo was coming to town, or David Villa or another star. So it was a really weird mix of people watching the game. Like, half of them would be like, "Oh, this is terrible soccer," and half of them were trying to just watch the game because it's an important match. And it got kind of bad, I would say, atmosphere-wise, but the team got better, at least in Toronto, and I think that atmosphere was changed by the product on the field. But I have found that MLS is a league that, I think, obviously, North America is still growing when it comes to soccer, and we hear this all the time about growth, and it's going to be massive, but that is the case for MLS. But that's led them to try some new stuff, and that they were one of the first leagues to really go all in on EMLS and have players affiliated with clubs and do it that route. But I wondered, Chu, if you have any notes from those experiences of hosting the events in Atlanta and being around EMLS, because I think exposure is something that they are looking for when they throw these kind of things, to get people who might have heard of MLS, the actual product, but they could get through it from FIFA and the esports angle.
Yeah, where I first gained my respect for like MLS as an organization was when I was working at EA Sports. And the thing with MLS, the way they have a better approach to things, because like, unlike the Premier League, unlike Liga, Serie A, like, they came to EA knowing that, like, all right, kids will interact with football through the game and our league through the game. So we kind of need you as much as more than you might need us. So let's do something. Like, you rarely get the Premier League being like, hey, let's do something. At least not back in those days. Being like, oh, let's do something. Like, let's do like something that's exclusive to FIFA in game with MLS. Let's do like a whole, like, I remember
it's a lot of hurdles you're jumping, right? It's a lot of hurdles you're jumping to do deals with the bigger leagues.
Oh yeah, 100%. Even back when I was starting, again, when all that YouTube stuff was starting, like, trying to get United to do something in terms of YouTube. I think I would say Man City, to be honest with you, was very forward facing when it comes to the Premier League, and then the other clubs started to pick up. But like, just trying to convince them that this was the way forward. And then MLS just like understood it. Just like, I think they were like the first league to just have like all their highlights just like available instantly right after the game. And then they really just knew that FIFA was just a way for kids to know who the MLS players are, even when the kids are watching in Europe. So we would do a lot of activations with them. I think one of my favorite events ever at EA was working an event for MLS All-Stars in 2015, where like we're playing FIFA, and like MLS was so cool. Like, they would like funnel Kaká to come say hi to us in like the promo we're streaming with Castro 1021, and they were just like, oh, you want Kaká to come chill for a bit? We're like, I don't know, maybe.
Sure.
Like, I don't know.
Sure,
why not?
Sure.
And like Tottenham was in town because they're All-Stars. They're playing Tottenham, and like you just said, like Danny Rose, Lloris was just walking around. Just in the background, just like hanging out with us and stuff like that. And they were just so like into that. So I had a lot of respect for them in that sense. And then they were the first people to like start to pick up the esports side of things. And again, I think they do probably one of the best jobs at like taking care of the players, trying to make them feel like they're stars. They have them in the same media days as like Zlatan and stuff like that, and Wayne Rooney. So they're always really forward facing. So I always have to give MLS a lot of credit for that. It seems maybe like the simplest thing when you think about it. Like, oh, if more kids play this game with our teams and they recognize those names will stick with them. But at least for me growing up, that's how I retained a lot of the random sports knowledge I had. And it was like random video games and random things I would see, and it would stick. And I think obviously times have changed and maybe there are more distractions, but I still think it works if you have
outward facing attempts to get more people to know who your players are. And I think, like you were saying, like MLS is trying. And when we were working with the bigger leagues, it's a lot more of us pitching to them something to do and them being like, hell no, we're not doing that. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? That's a terrible idea. Like, but the CPL now is also kind of dipping their toes in the water there. And you've been working with them on that. What's that project sort of entail?
Yeah. So, I mean, at first, the CPL, the project I had with CPL was to do like a weekly series where they would have a tournament for FIFA esports players to represent like CPL teams, and then there'll be build up to a final. Unfortunately, with the COVID-19 stuff, that got put on hold halfway through, and then we ended up doing a live stream tournament where it was kind of like a pro-am or like a pro in real life CPL player would team up with an esports player, and we'll do a tournament every Friday between all the clubs, and that actually worked out pretty well. And it was a good idea, a good way to pivot because I mean, what can you do, right? You have to get something out of the situation that we're in, and it was good to see, like, you got to see the personalities of the actual players. A lot of the players actually played a lot of FIFA, and a lot of them are actually really, really good at FIFA. So I think that kind of helped them out because, I think the thing that they're facing is that they have a small market, and I think FIFA is a way for them to branch out of that small market in terms of Canada.
It's an accessibility thing, huge, and when people can't really go outside to access anything, this is the way to do it. And I think it's been an interesting endeavor, and it makes sense. I mean, just a lot of life. I feel like not just sports is about name recognition or recognizing something vaguely familiar, and then be like, all right, I'll stick with this a bit longer. And then you get stuck with it. And I think the CPL had that momentum, and hopefully they can continue to carry that on. Chu, to wrap up, I love, you always used to get questions, or I used to get questions when I was working at EA, and my favorite question I ever used to get, because it was full of such anti-Canadian hatred that it used to make me laugh, but also sad. It's why is FIFA made in Vancouver, and what the hell do Canadians know about soccer, was one of the things that I always used to get. And they made it, and the people made it seem like we wouldn't allow anyone not Canadian into the building to work on the game. Like this was a strictly Canadian operation.
Oh boy. Yeah, it was. You still get that. I mean, even now as a content creator, well, people think I'm American for some reason. I guess because of the accent. So they're like, what do you know about, like, when I talk about United, like, what do you know about United, man? I'm like, dude, like, I've literally seen every single Premier League season, and you're 16. So what are you talking about? But in terms of like EA, yeah, like it's made in Vancouver. I mean, Electronic Arts probably got a whole bunch of, initially like a lot of tax breaks and stuff like that in that province. So that's why they made a studio there. But I mean, most of the key deciders, most of the team leaders, most of the lead developers are not even Canadian. They're all, European for the most part, I would say, British, German, you name it. So a lot of the team are not, they're not Canadian at all. It's kind of funny.
It's literally the United Nations in that office. Oh, yeah. And so keep that in mind when you're cursing the game or replying to a corporate account. Some nonsensical rambling. It's not only Canadians who make it. No, the person reading that complaint probably not having an issue with whatever you're meant. So.
And even the stats are like the stats are literally, the team that do the stats aren't even in Vancouver, they're literally in Germany. So if you're mad at Germans about the stats, all right, go talk to Germans.
I think when I first started there, and just not the power, but like when you're running accounts with like 7 million people following, the fear at the beginning was quite hilarious. I did, because it was weird to fully grasp how many people actually play this game and then to be working behind the scenes with it. But it's definitely cool. It's definitely a career altering experience. And Chu, I mean, you are exhibit A of it having being a life-changing experience.
Oh yeah, it was definitely life-changing. The good thing about working at EA is that you can branch out to pretty much like whatever you want, especially in the video game scene. Usually you're able to branch out to so many things, and like like you said, since FIFA's so big, I mean, you kind of like experience the most, like sometimes the worst situations, and just being in such a big franchise, you just have to handle things that like are way above the level that you're at, and that just like gives you way more experience that like you can go to somewhere else and it's not even going to be, you're not even going to break a sweat compared to what you went through at EA. So it really gears you up for a lot of things in life.
It's Chu Morah, official Torontonian. He has sworn off Vancouver forever. I'm glad we have this breaking news to send back over the West Coast. Chu, thanks so much, man.
Hey, no problem.
Welcome back to a football podcast. That was our interview with Chu Morah, also known as Chu Boy on the interwebs. David, I mentioned this with Chu, and I think the rise of Ultimate Team and basically everything FIFA has really altered the way we look at the game of soccer in general. And I wonder, like, when you were growing up, how big of a role did FIFA play in like your absorption of soccer? Because I mean, in North America, even though if you had family or you had family from other countries originally, like to be able to really immerse yourself in soccer in the 90s was really tough.
I will say this. I own an Alan Shearer Newcastle jersey. I have no idea where it is, and it's because of FIFA. So they made Newcastle $70 one time because of
Mike
that video
Ashley.
game.
Mike Ashley still has that somewhere.
Yeah.
Personally
exactly.
marked.
It's part of the pitch when he tries to sell the team. He's like, well, one time we sold this jersey to this guy on Long Island. But it was huge. 2002 World Cup game. I still remember you had the player with the star underneath it who was the best player on the field. And you could tackle guys off the field. So that was awesome. But I still remember it was a massive part of getting into the game. And I've talked to people. I've worked around some of the people I'm sure that you've interacted with in the MLS circles who say like, what it did for you for the sport, it can do for people who already like soccer for MLS. And I think Chu Boy talked about that of what they've done and the efforts they've made because everyone already plays FIFA. Everyone plays as Chelsea, Barcelona, and Real Madrid. Everyone knows the players on Chelsea, Barcelona, and Real Madrid. So if you can get people to play as Atlanta and LA and Montreal and all those things, you start to learn about it, you start to care about it a little bit, get connected to it. It has a ton of potential.
I think even if they're using all the superstar players, even if you see that Atlanta United kit or that Nashville kit being used by a FIFA pro and they're playing on quote unquote the biggest stage, it matters and people will remember what that looks like. And some of the rules that they put in, I think initially what happened was all of the pros would use the best players who would usually be the same guys. And when MLS decided to put in that quota for how many MLS guys you needed in your squad, it made more people talk about them and it made more people examine who to use. And through that conversation was generated. And I think that is one of the goals. I remember FIFA for me, I think it was the Bergkamp cover edition of FIFA that got me onto Arsenal, got me onto following the sport super closely. So that tie was forever forged. And when I went to live in South Korea, one of the things I did when I taught English there was play FIFA with the kids and talk about the games and do match reports in English. So it's something that has been intertwined with my life for so long. And to be able to go work there was a bit of a dream. And I have a lot of respect for these guys who are doing something basically that's really never been done. And Jimmy Conrad's one of those people, and so is Chu. So it's always a treat to get to chat with them. But David, I'm going to ask you for a bold prediction in the sense that, like, do you think things like FIFA or other video games are the primary draw to get younger fans in? Or do you think it is gone beyond that realm where like the influencers now don't even have to be like associated with soccer?
I think if I knew this, I'd have a lot more money than I currently did.
I'd say
I'd be a lot more.
I was asking you because I'm trying to fill out this last slide in my PowerPoint deck that I got to present. So
I was gonna ask you this.
I'll take a stab. It is a big problem for other sports that I like a lot, and I use tennis as an example of. I don't think it's. The problem with tennis is it's an expensive sport in some cases, and I think the viewership generally tends to skew older at the events because the tickets are so expensive. But for the most part, young people still watch it. It's just really hard to get into the game because there really is no good vehicle for it in video games. And I think that's the conversation that people are having. And that every time that does happen, FIFA is the example that's used. It's like, this is the dream of what it could be like to get people in. So I don't think there is an equivalent. I think this remains the best way. And it is really, it's a huge money-making operation for EA, of course, but globally, we talk about football in general and transfer fees and everything, but this industry and what they're doing on Ultimate Team and et cetera, it's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think the only comp is like the Instagram highlight culture of the NBA and how that's brought people in who probably don't sit and watch a full NBA game ever, maybe outside of the finals, but they're NBA fans and they know everything that's going on because of the culture that league's built. I think FIFA is like the only comp to that, of a way to bring people in who maybe don't really care or don't watch the games or, aren't that into it. It's like a different part of the world that exists, but it's amazing how big it is. Just like everyone plays of all ages. Anyone who has ever picked up a video game of any sort, console, whatever, individual on the computer, doesn't matter. Everyone's played FIFA. So it's huge. And I think it's going to be interesting. What fascinates me is like you talk about Chu Boy being an early adopter is like, we don't know where this ends. And so for me, people who choose to operate in space like that, of like, there's potential, but there's no guarantees, that I'm always impressed by people like that. And that's like Jimmy Conrad. Jimmy Conrad goes 2 foot in with 1,000 levels of energy to things he has no idea will work, where I'm like, I don't know. I'll just do the thing that I've heard of before and like not even put that much energy into it. People like that are impressive because those are the people that change things and push things and create new industries and create new ways of operating in industries. And you remember them 30 years later as like a big famous name. But I think this is a space where we're watching people become those people.
Times have changed, Mr. Goss, but we move forward. A reminder, we are on Patreon. $4 a month gets you exclusive content, including our interview series where we talk to the newsmakers in football. You also get a 1994 World Cup trading card pack set from Upper Deck. That's it for this week. For Mr. Goss and myself, thank you for listening to the Football Podcast. We will talk to you soon.